Welcome to Seriously, What Could They Be Thinking? The podcast that digs into questions we all wish we could ask out loud. Today, we're diving into the minds of managers everywhere. You know, those brave souls juggling KPIs, calendar invites, and the occasional existential crisis. Seriously, what could they be thinking? So grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and let's find out if manager mental health is just an agenda item or the real MVP of the workplace.
Jamie, I'm glad we're doing manager mental health. I know we usually talk about decisions facing leaders today, and I think this is a decision that leaders don't know that they're facing today.
Today and every day, right?
Exactly. Do you want to start us off with a bit of the numbers?
Mental health is a real issue in the United States and inside any company that's there. Actually, if you start looking at some statistics, it suggests that mental health issues cost the US economy $282 billion annually.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot.
Another unplanned absenteeism due to mental health issues, $47.6 billion annually. And about 19% of US workers report mental health that's only fair or poor, which is adding to that substantial cost.
That's fascinating. And I actually just did some research recently on the cost of healthcare. The cost of healthcare has risen for corporations 40% in the last decade. I think it's over 50% of the US suffers from some sort of chronic illness, and 20% of the US is depressed. And so if you think about like the massive impact of mental health challenges as a part of chronic illness, it's not just the productivity decline, it's also the actual real dollars that employers are spending to take care of their employees. That's going up too.
It absolutely is. And actually, there's one thing, unresolved depression alone is suggesting a 35% decline in productivity by that person, which is $210 billion of loss every year in the US economy for just
Wow.
depression.
I believe it too. And I think a lot of it was highlighted or potentially even amplified during COVID, right? There was a lot of discussion around mental health. When I look at managers, it does occur to me that managers could experience more burnout challenges, more mental health challenges, because they sit in the middle of unrealistic expectations that come down from the top and trying to balance what their teams are facing. A lot of managers also take on some of the work of their teams when their teams are facing mental health challenges of their own. So the role of a manager is particularly sensitive, I believe, in having to both manage expectations both up and down in an organization.
As a manager, every manager I've ever known has actually dreamed at some point of stepping back down into the individual contributor level because, oh my gosh, my stress will disappear, right? Because it's,
Right.
it's more about what I do. And I feel like I've got more control over my success or not. When you're a manager, you're not just managing yourself, you're having to try to pull everybody else out. And so that means doing things like trying to take on the burden when you feel like somebody is overwhelmed or
Yeah.
trying to protect them from overwhelm. It means that you're carrying greater burden than
Yeah.
potentially the everyday employee. Now you get paid for it,
Yes.
but that
Managers
doesn't
do get
actually
paid.
really help you with
Right.
maybe to afford some mental health care, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, in that position, especially if you're empathetic, right? Because empathetic managers make the best managers, but they also tend to get empathy fatigue. That's what I always called it. I don't know if that's a real thing because they're caring so much about their employees. And that idea that managers are more burned out or maybe more prone to mental health challenges actually shows in the numbers because they're 36% more likely than non-managers to report burnout systems. Somewhere between actually 36 and 53% more likely to report those symptoms. So I think it's a challenge that is definitely facing our managers, and I think it's going to increase as artificial intelligence very rapidly changes many organizations, and managers are dealing with potentially unrealistic expectations from above and people who are afraid for their job and their team.
You actually said an interesting word, which is burnout, which is something that everybody kind of talks about. But burnout isn't just like a single day, oh my gosh, I'm so burned out, right? There's an
Right.
actual definition of it. So, Cindy, what is that definition?
So burnout is just like you would think from a candle burning out, you're out of fuel. So it's either emotional, physical, or mental exhaustion, and is typically caused by prolonged or excessive stress. And so there are basically three factors or three dimensions that they talk about when they analyze or research burnout. We talked about emotional exhaustion. So it's just, I am drained, I'm overwhelmed. I know I experienced this during COVID. I talked a little bit about empathy fatigue. I struggled to cope with stress and I just had nothing left to give. I had nothing. That was emotional exhaustion. The second one is depersonalization. And so if you ever have a coworker that is just so overwhelmed, they develop cynicism, or they start to become detached towards their work or other people. That's one aspect. And then the third one is basically you stop accomplishing things. So you just don't want to put in the effort and you feel ineffective or incompetent. So those are all feelings. Now it's different than depression, which has an official diagnosis and all. This also has an official diagnosis. And some of the warning signs to look for are essentially if you just can't muster energy or excitement about your work, you struggle to do problem solving. So you may be in a mental fog. And some of these, I think, carry over between different diagnoses, right? From a
Yeah,
mental perspective.
I can feel that way as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm overwhelmed rather than burnt out.
Exactly. I think the thing about burnout is that it's chronic and it doesn't go away with a good night's sleep, right? Or it doesn't go away with a short vacation. I tell a lot of people, take a few days off, go find some solitude. That's not going to cure burnout, right?
Yeah.
It's way longer than that.
Yeah. And it's a real problem, right? We
Yes.
all originally got those jobs because we love them, right?
Mhm.
That's typically how you move into management role, which is you were an individual contributor, you loved what you did, you accelerated and you really did a great job
Mhm.
with what you do. A lot of times though, that's because you had technical expertise
Right.
in that. And so you've got passion, you've got motivation, you've got items that are there, and then you end up becoming a manager. And
Yes.
now, on top of that technical expertise that you have, you need to be a people person expert, right? You've got to be able
Right.
to motivate your team and keep them on track and manage their stress levels and blah, 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 blah. And that creates a situation where you may very more easily get burnt out yourself.
Absolutely. And a lot of that is lack of understanding of expectations of the role. So a lot of people become managers because they were really good experts and not because they're great at managing people. Or a lot of folks are promoted into management that don't recognize that now their job is they thrive when their team thrives, right? So a lot of it is improperly set expectations and individuals who are still trying to thrive the way they used to. And it just doesn't work anymore. And you will burn yourself out trying
Yeah,
to be the
I think
best
about
expert.
all of those people, teachers, any
Mhm.
sort of computer scientists or engineers and stuff like that, who went to school for years to learn their various skills.
Mhm.
What they didn't learn was how to manage other people during
Right.
that time period. Now, I'm a business professor, so I actually do have a couple of classes that are in management, right? I am
Mhm.
actually teaching a little bit of these skills, but it's just a
Mhm.
little bit. Even when you go into the Masters of Business Administration, right? You get your master's with a lot of management focus. You don't get a lot of training. And that's
Right.
actually a really interesting point, right? We actually lack a lot of management training when you become a manager.
Right.
And that's going to affect your mental health.
Absolutely. I think managers get something like, is it 44% of all the training in the organization? So they get a lesser percentage of training in an organization. And the ROI on training is from $7 to $11 return. So a 7 to 11 times ROI, if you will, for every dollar spent on leadership training, right? So, and we have a tendency to train our leaders on things that we consider to be more hard skills, strategic management. Let's learn how to use a framework rather than teaching them the skills that will actually be effective with their team, which tend to be more psychological skills.
Yeah, I mean, things like emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
how to have hard conversations, they're really interesting and vital skills as a manager, but it's very few people who actually get formal training in
Yeah.
this items. Now, I will admit that's true with me too. I've actually seen a bit of a shift in my own work that is
Mhm.
attempting to do a little bit of that for the very first time because they've seen so much burnout. So
Mhm.
what's the source of this burnout, especially as a manager? I'm going to guess you're being asked to do more with
Yeah,
less.
100%. And when you're asked as a manager to do more with less, so are your teams. And so we talked a little bit earlier about attempting to overcome some of that by taking on the work yourself, right? I find very frequently that managers don't recognize that when they're told to do more or to do the same with less, that they have to reset expectations and manage up so that they can say, yes, I will do this, but I'm going to do it this way now because you haven't given me the same resources or you've given me less resources than I had before. So either managers not being enabled to say, I appreciate you want me to do the same with less. I'm going to do it differently. They're not given permission, or they just don't even know to try.
They don't know to try, is my guess, or they're afraid to try, right? Because they
Right.
are oftentimes new in this role, or something else is going on. They understand the greater pressures going on in the company, and so they
Mhm.
don't want to be the person who says, "No, no, no, I can't do that." They've been
Right.
trained all the time to be, "Yes, I can get that done. Yes, I can do that." That's how they got their role in the first place, right?
Right. And so certainly they don't want to say that they have their own mental health challenges, right? So we're dealing with we're dealing with more with less and putting mental health challenges on top of it when you know that those management roles and the higher you go, the more competitive they are because there are fewer of them, and definitely aren't going to raise their hand to say that they're having some sort of a mental health challenge. So it's a tough spot for managers. I'm I'm curious. I know you've dug into some of the research here. Are you seeing any sort of generational divide in from a financial perspective on manager burnout?
There is a generational divide. Mainly younger individuals are not only experiencing greater
Mhm.
burnout, which I find interesting, but they are more likely to tell you. And I'm actually not sure if they are experiencing greater burnout. Like this is me being
Oh yeah.
skeptical, to be honest. It's that they're more likely to tell you that they are
Hmm.
experiencing burnout, right? The stoicism that was bred into the baby boomers,
Hmm.
right? That then led to Generation X being a little bit more free, but still stoic, right? Like,
Hmm.
I mean, a number of times I've been told, suck it up, Buttercup. Um, it was not an inappropriate comment when I was a kid. These days,
Right.
my kids would kill me if I said something like that. They're telling me, random comments like, I'm sorry, I've reached my limit today. We're going to have to wait till tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, thank you, 7-year old. Why are you saying that? It's
That's
amazing.
okay. So I'm impressed with the vocabulary of your children, and I'm impressed that you don't say "suck it up, Buttercup" because I did. Oh, wait a minute. My
Oh,
favorite is it's good to want things. Move on. Moving
oh,
on.
I like that. No, I do say "suck it up, Buttercup," and then I get yelled at by my
Oh,
children for saying something like that.
I
So,
gotcha. Okay. All right.
it's all good because but it's usually because of like a scraped knee or something like that. It's not because of mental health anguish.
I see. Okay. When you talk a little bit about the next generation, and I don't know if we're talking about millennials or Gen Z, but do you see that they are moving into manager roles and are they starting to experience some of the manager stress that we're hearing about or talking about?
Absolutely. They absolutely are. And it's scary how quickly things can unravel is the best way to put it. When you come into a manager, you've got multiple roles, you've got heavy workloads, you're going to
Mhm.
worry with budget cuts, you're going to have to work with remote communication. All of these things are raising stress.
Yeah.
Right. And when you feel unsupported because you're in a new management role, so maybe that's why we're seeing these stats because we're finally measuring them. I think
Right.
that's also a lot. We're measuring them for the first time, and these are individuals not used to this. But if you're trying to, like, if you do a survey right now, right, of management, then
Hmm.
if you're trying to manage or do a survey of baby boomer managers, they've been managers for years,
Yeah. They're
right? If you do the
desensitized to
younger
it a bit.
generation, the
Yeah.
millennials or the Gen Y or heaven forbid Gen Z already managing, then you're going to find people who are not trained, right? You're going
Right.
to get less of that. And the reality is that once you feel unsupported, you don't give them that training, 4 times more likely to quit,
Yeah.
twice as likely to report poor well-being associated with it. So there's a real cost that results in real dollars of a company
Right.
having this issue. So I'll be honest, I am not a touchy-feely type of person. That's why I went into finance. Money does not have feelings, which I love. Um, but this is actually something that is really concerning to me. And so as we start talking about it more and we remove the stigma of having burnout issues, right?
Mm,
And stuff, we may see some improvement that's there. And we are seeing some, right? We
mhm.
are seeing companies at least becoming more aware and actually trying to invest in wellness for their employees beyond just, insurance.
Absolutely. Well, before we dive into the numbers there, when we talk about employee engagement, and I study employee engagement quite a bit because over time I have recognized that the manager, not only does the manager play a pivotal role in the company, but it plays a pivotal role in an employee's life. So if you take two employees and look at the variance in their engagement, 70% of the difference in how an employee shows up at work is due to the person that they report to. So 70% of how any individual shows up at work is determined by the person they report to. If the person that you report to is burned out and is struggling to give you empathy, then you're going to start to feel disconnected. So it begins to amplify. And the higher it goes in the organization, the more suppressed the entire organization becomes. So it is an exponential effect. And I think that it's something that we don't recognize often enough. We think that if our employees are having challenges, mental health challenges or engagement challenges, then it's the manager's job to fix it. Well, managers are employees too. And that's the thing that I think we forget all the time. Because I was told when I became a second line manager that, Cindy, you're not going to get any more feedback anymore. You're at a high enough level now that you just got to figure it out on your own. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that's, by the way, not okay. Right. So,
Not okay. And I find
yep,
that interesting too, because there are statistics out there that show that one of the biggest issues with being a manager is that you become lonely. Right?
absolutely.
You're no longer a part of the group. You're no longer a part of
Mhm.
the crowd. You're above them. And there's plenty of even even on 30 Rock, which my husband is obsessed with. He loves that show, even though it's been off the air for a while. She even talked about the fact I can't be a part of that group because if I am, then they're not going to have as good of a time. Right.
Right.
Because they're going to think they need to perform for the manager that's there. And there have been times I've thrown parties for my team and my boss shows up for 10 minutes and then purposely leaves
Right.
because with the comment that if I leave everybody can unwind and have a good time. If
Right.
I stay, then it's a different atmosphere. And so having a manager who recognizes their
Mhm.
impact is
Mhm.
really good, but also on his own behalf, right? That makes it a lot lonelier.
Absolutely.
Can't
And
mingle with us.
yeah, exactly. And actually, some of the research from a friend of ours, Kristen Prince, it shows that it's not only that exclusion from those social, the parties and that kind of stuff, but it's managers have information they're not allowed to share. And people gossip for a reason. It's because it's actually, well, gossip in general, I think we decided is research decided is bad for you. But sharing information or the occasional, commiserating shortly or briefly over something that's frustrating, that's actually somewhat healthy. And so managers often can't do that. And it's that holding the information in that actually does a tremendous amount of harm for managers. And so you can imagine why they would leave the party early. There's multiple reasons. One, they want everybody to have fun. But the other thing is they really don't want to continue to have to hold that information in when they're around everybody else.
You're absolutely right. The number of times I've had to come home and I just spiel to my husband who
Mhm.
has no, relation to this. But
Yep.
I just need to tell somebody. I need to walk this through because I'm not there. And yes, you don't have any ability. And so it doesn't work as well as if somebody had inside knowledge, but it was at least a source that was there. And as a
Yeah.
result, everybody tries to find peers, and those peers may be different. Now, if you're in a hyper competitive market, that's a really interesting scenario because if you're competing for the next level job, you may see your peer group in the management level as rivals rather than as potential allies.
We're going to have somebody come on, or Kristen come on and talk about her research because she actually has all the answers. So we'll have to do that in a future podcast. I do want to share, though, when we talk about managers as team members, so managers as employees, they need the same things that everyone else needs. They need recognition for the work that they do or the leadership that they're giving. They need autonomy. Don't micromanage me. with the mandatory training. I don't know where I got that from, but I need autonomy. I need to be able to say, that's not what's right for my team right now. My team needs to focus on X part of the business instead of Y. And then, they need the ability to find colleagues like we were talking about. They need the ability to be a peer with someone. And even if it's intentionally finding someone outside the company. So I think every time we think about employees, if we can take those same concepts and just simply keep moving them up a level and recognizing that those key things are non-negotiable at every level. I think that's critical.
I think it is. And so companies are trying to do some of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's some statistics out there that suggest that for every dollar that companies put into workplace mental health interventions, that the median ROI is $5 back, right? Because it reduces absenteeism, and staff turnover, things like that. However, as you know, there is a very big difference between the ROI of, say, paying for a therapist and the ROI of screening to make sure everybody's okay in the first place.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that became very apparent in COVID, and I keep talking about COVID so much because it revealed so much about mental health in the corporate workplace, but there were a ton of studies that show that your standard ERP plan, employee resource program, that's the program that gives you access to mental health therapists or mental health resources and maybe legal resources. I'm not sure, but it's the one that's typically known for mental or emotional family support. They don't work. They just don't work. And we found a study that says just standard therapy kind of okay works, but not really. That there are other things that we need to be doing. And it's talking about wellness or mental wellness, talking about mental well-being and training about mental well-being and not doing it like we do our, what is the mandatory harassment training?
Yes.
Not that we should mandatorily be harassing, but that we mandatory shouldn't be harassing and the training. But taking an individual mental wellness program doesn't work. But it works when we talk about it as a group.
Yeah. So I actually find it really interesting. So how do you manage your own burnout? How do you manage what's going on? What can companies do?
Mm-hmm.
Number one, they need to be able to budget the time and teach people how to budget their time, right? That is a good training that can help people manage their workload and their stress level.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you've got to do the training on how to have harder conversations. Role play, practice it, right? Even if you don't have training, find somebody at work who's on your level that is an ally and not a rival, and even role play that out. I know that the last time I had to fire somebody and it was going to be a really delicate situation, that's exactly what I did. I said, hey, I need to practice this one. And it really helped me get through it, both for the benefit of the employee. I think they ended up in a stronger position, but also for me, because I was able to work through it and know how it's there. And that helped me mentally in the post math, because a number of times I've had to fire somebody and I came home and I think I cried more than they did.
Right.
Is a real world situation. So trying to find those scenarios, and then there's always going to be the other things. Get a good night's sleep, physical exercise, those type of things that help traditionally manage stress. You've got to allow both you as the manager and your employees the space to get that done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, if you are not modeling it, it's not okay for the employee. So you have to be modeling the behaviors for your employee. I love Satya Nadella's whole philosophy around leadership. Model is first. Model. So lead the way, coach, obviously help people improve, and then care, right? And it's in that way. So modeling, if you put modeling first, you are going to go get the exercise. You're going to take the time and your team's going to see it happening. And I think that's critical. The other thing I want to just call out is that if you want real innovation in your organization, and we're talking an awful lot about AI recently, it is going to turn companies upside down a bit. If you want real innovation, your managers need psychological safety too, right? They need to feel like they can object or they can throw out new ideas and those ideas won't be met with criticism or they won't be fired for them. And so just continuously remembering what's good for the employee is good for the manager is one of those little tricks we can sort of keep in mind.
I do think that there's greater awareness about this, and we need to continue to create additional awareness for the
Mhm.
benefits, right? And I do think that managers are thinking about this, and that's the good
Yes.
news, right? But we'll see what happens in the future because
So, yeah.
talking feelings, talking softness, not always going to be in vogue.
No, I agree. And we're seeing that right now. There was an article recently about how announcing layoffs over implementation is becoming a good thing, right? So yeah, I think we're going to see a little more ruthlessness in the market around cutting headcount. And how is that going to affect manager mental health when they know they're the ones who have to deliver the news about impacting someone's life? So yeah, I definitely think we should keep talking about it. If we could give our managers one tip, I would tell them to figure out how to push back productively. If you're being asked to do more with less, either figure out how physics changed or propose a new solution, propose a new way of doing things, because you can't do the exact same thing today with less people. Something has to change. So how can you propose, yes, we'll be happy to do that. Here's what it's going to look like. That's the skill that managers need to be confident in sharing.
And seek out trainings, read books, do other things,
Absolutely.
realize that management is a skill, just like your statistics, just like your ability to run that supply chain. It is a skill. And so go ahead and seek out that training because it will help you manage the stress that comes with that big promotion.
It's great advice. Fantastic. And so all of our managers out there, the next time you see your manager staring into space like they're questioning all of their life choices, spoiler alert, they probably are.
And if you're a manager listening to this while deleting emails during your lunch break, consider the official reminder: burnout is not a badge of honor, it's a business risk.
Agreed. Yeah. Investing in mental health isn't just a nice to have anymore. It is an ROI positive effort, and it's talent retaining. And honestly, it's going to save your sanity.
Because when your managers are smiling, your spreadsheets usually are too.
I didn't know that spreadsheet smiled.
I didn't know either.
Thanks for joining us on Seriously, What Could They Be Thinking, where leadership meets the bottom line and occasionally loses its mind. Until next time, keep your spreadsheets handy and your coffee strong.